Hello, everybody, and I do hope that, yes, you have had a good Maltese lunch, I hope, Mario. So, Gwen, and I'm going to be very familiar, because I already feel very familiar in this environment. Mario, dear friends from across the globe, I'm told, I really would like to start my contribution by conveying my appreciation to the organizers of NATURA for the invite to address this interesting gathering. When Mario invited me to address this conference, I was intrigued upon learning of the critical and timely project of NATURA, and this conference, which was themed the Nature-Based Solutions for Urban Resilience in Anthropocene. I would also like to take the opportunity to commend the fact that this project transcends borders. Your collective contributions can undoubtedly positively influence and impact the necessary advocacy for the essential actions that are so needed in addressing such an unprecedented global challenge and crisis. I would also like to commend the focus of your project, namely to advance global urban resilience in the context of the growing risks and dangers caused by extreme weather. I therefore would like to share some thoughts with you during my contribution to further stimulate your thoughts for your upcoming discussions. The European Commission estimates that by 2050, some 80% of the European Union's population will live in urban areas. Furthermore, we are told that estimations show that 30% will be over the age of 65. The loss of green spaces because of urbanization, construction, overdevelopment, and traffic implies that we must do more to ensure that the long-term health and sustainable well-being of the individual, the family, and the community, and in particular our children and young people, are kept at the heart of our national and international agenda. The loss of our open spaces in both rural and urban areas is a social, economic, as well as an environmental challenge. This loss poses the very real risk of completely losing the precious spaces at the heart of our communities that are so needed to form strong and resilient communities, build relationships, and feel connected to our environmental heritage and to one another. It is in this context that the authorities and governments need urgently to put issues of climate change and environmental degradation at the heart of all their policies. During my term as President of Malta, I set up the Malta Foundation for the Well-being of Society to focus on the well-being of children, the promotion of children's rights, and the creation of opportunities for children's participation. In fact, the Foundation set up a Children's Council as well as a Young Persons Council, as we want to give children and young persons a safe space whereby they can voice their concerns and aspirations about issues that affect and impact their very lives. We wanted to recognize and acknowledge and stress that children are rights holders as well. Our aim was and still is to advocate for the necessary changes in our society from children's and young persons' perspectives. From our hands-on experience, children and young persons have constantly raised issues concerning climate change, the environment, and the need for more green, open, inclusive, and safe spaces in their communities. These issues have been and still are their main concerns for the present and their future lives. I therefore would like that my contribution today will mainly focus on the perspectives of children and young persons regarding their plight for the mitigation and damage limitation of our environment with its impact on climate change and human well-being. I will discuss this major concern for the children and young persons, which is conveyed to me directly by them when I meet them in schools, through the discussions with children and young persons councils, and also through my work as president of Eurochild. Eurochild is a pan-European network that brings together hundreds of organizations from 35 countries in Europe that work with and for children. I'm sure that the outcry by children and young people to move from words to action comes to no surprise to any of you. We have seen during these last years a most diligent children's movement growing and taking to the streets of our countries, advocating and prioritizing climate and environmental justice. It has become very clear to everyone that our younger generations are deeply aware and very concerned of the urgency for urgent attention and action to safeguard our environment so as to mitigate and hopefully reverse the adverse effects on the climate. According to data from a recent report published by the World Health Organization entitled Inheriting a Sustainable World, Atlas on Children's Health and the Environment, a large portion of the most common causes of death among children between 1 month to 5 years of age are preventable through interventions known as to reduce environmental risks. Children are particularly vulnerable to environmental risks, including pollution, hazardous chemicals and waste, radiation, climate change, as well as emerging threats like e-waste. Here I ask, although research is very clearly showing the need for urgent action to counter climate change and environmental degradation, why are our authorities so slow in taking the necessary actions? Why is the international community so slow to act tangibly to address the concerns of our children and our young people with regards to climate change and the deteriorating environment for the well-being of our children? It seems that the international community still thinks that organizing one COP after the other without achieving the necessary tangible results will placate this global movement of young activists to address climate change and introduce climate and environmental justice. It will not placate anyone. COPs are not placating children. No wonder Greta Thunberg's address to hundreds of young activists during the Glasgow Summit, COP26, has called on governments to stop their blah, blah, blah. I do hope that it is not the economy that is holding back the much needed change for the well-being of all humanity, and in particular, our children's present and even more, their future. That is why projects like NATURA, where scientists from across the globe have the space to come in collaboration together, are so important. Projects like NATURA give me hope for a better world for our children and young people, as you will surely leave an impact. Strong voices like yours are so important to sustain and support our children's flight for a better tomorrow. I also believe that the calls made by children and young people in some countries are gaining some ground, and this too gives me some hope. Let me take an example from my own country, Malta. Children's calls for action seems to have captured a new political resolve. Lately, the expression of a new political will seems to be taking some ground, and the sense of a new and important direction. The new government elected last week is promising an investment of 700 million euros over these 7 years in what is being termed the creation of green lungs for urban spaces. It is hoped that this will ensure not only some much needed community green and local spaces, but residents would not need to drive their cars to spend time in an open public space away from their towns and villages. The proposal involves the creation of a network of gardens and open spaces, including parks, urban green reclamation projects, urban greening initiatives, underground parking where possible, green areas spread over car tunnels, and car-free areas in different localities. On the other hand, on an international level, I feel perplexed, as although we have various international instruments in place, agreed by practically all of the international community to safeguard us all, with some also focusing on children in particular, seem to have found, unfortunately, their place on the back burner of international action. For example, the Human Rights Council resolutions 37/8, 35/20, and 40/11 specifically address the rights of children and young people with respect to environmental harm and climate change. These resolutions clearly state that a safe climate is a vital element to the right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, which is essential to human life and well-being. Another example is Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which states that children's participation in issues that affect them is part of their fundamental human right. Children and young people have a right to be listened to, and it is the duty of all of us, including authorities, to take into consideration their aspirations in changing the future of our Earth for climate and environmental justice to prevail. Furthermore, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child also gives importance to environmental justice. Article 31 of the UNCRC clearly states, and I quote, "Environments in which play and recreation opportunities are available to all children provide the conditions for creativity, opportunities to exercise competence through self-initiated play, enhances motivation, physical activity, and skills development. Immersion in cultural life enriches playful interactions. Rest ensures that children have the necessary energy and motivation to participate in play and creative engagement." Unquote. It is clear that the international community is well aware of the fact that climate change and environmental degradation undermine the rights of every child. There are also UN entities that have been pushing for the attention of the international community to regard the well-being of children in this context. UNICEF, for one, also works with young people to have their voices heard on climate change through creative platforms, advocacy, and participation at major United Nations summits. UNICEF also works with governments and partners globally to ensure children are an essential part of climate change strategies and disaster response plans. I'm sure that you are aware that the Paris Agreement commits the states to respect, promote, and consider their respective obligations on human rights, including the rights of children and intergenerational equity when taking action to address climate change. There is also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, specifically Goal number 13, which states, "Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts." As a global community, we definitely do not lack the necessary research and instruments to take the bull by its horns. Yet, we continuously fall short of the necessary actions to address this self-defeating lack of action. Even the Glasgow Summit, COP26, fell short of some essential targets. I might sound skeptic. Action was needed yesterday and not tomorrow. Children yearn to be in a natural environment if given the choice. They want to be outdoors in the fresh air and sunlight, by the sea and surrounded by greenery, trees and flowers, hearing the birds and the wind, playing in water with sticks and rocks. Children want to be safe from environmental harm and the damaged climate that continues to erode their well-being and their immediate future. UNICEF states that a child born today has a much better chance of reaching her 5th birthday than ever before. But climate change and environmental degradation is threatening to reverse progress on child and adolescent survival. health and well-being. The irony is that children are not responsible for the climate change brought about by human actions, yet they bear the greatest burden of its impact. Our children will be the first global generation of children to grow up in a world made far more dangerous and uncertain as a result of a changing climate and degraded environment. Without action now, climate change will exacerbate the inequalities that children already face, and future generations will continue to suffer. The global community has the means to act and has shown that it is capable of action in real time to address a crisis, with governments, businesses, and individuals taking measures and changing behaviors. A typical example is undoubtedly the response to the pandemic. The pandemic has shown us that when we act together, we are effective and successful. The pandemic is also evident of the effectiveness of even the smallest of personal actions that, when put together, the outcome is always positive. I believe that through the action of each and every one of us, we can make a difference. I believe also that children and young people can play a key role in addressing climate-related risks by promoting environmentally sustainable lifestyles and setting an example for their families and communities. Children can influence their families and their communities with a long-lasting effect on all of society. So many would probably say, but what can we all do to make a difference in such a climate and environmental crisis? Yes, we have much to do. Each and every one of us need to feel compelled to contribute to this challenge, even if in very small ways. We need to create more nurturing spaces for our children and for ourselves. We need to protect the most vulnerable. In the last few years, we have seen young people around the world raising their voices on an unprecedented scale, asking adults and leaders to protect them from climate change and environmental degradation. We must heed their plight. We need to make children's best interest the center of climate change strategies and response plans, while recognizing and acknowledging children as agents of change and valued contributors to our societies. The participation of children and young people is necessary if the interests of future generations are to be safeguarded. We need to promote the Intergovernmental Declaration on Children, Youth and Climate Action drafted during COP25 in Madrid if we want to see its proposals turn into action. The declaration is a commitment to accelerate inclusive, child and youth-centered climate policies and action at national and global levels. It is one of the many important steps towards developing global principles on children's rights and the environment. The declaration is actually a pledge drafted by children and youth and aligned to by champion governments willing to uphold priorities identified by children and youth throughout the world. It acknowledges the global leadership and calls of children and young people for urgent and immediate climate action, as well as their critical role as agents of change. I will just mention a few points from my own country that I consider to be the most relevant. Up to a few years ago, Maltese villages had a strong sense of community life, centered around the village piazza, the village square. Although community life is different from one locality to another, communities had a high level of active participation among residents, including children. Today, the spirit of the village piazza vanished, leaving little or no physical space in which to celebrate the feeling of connection among the community and the development of positive relationships, which is so central to well-being. In order to address this gap, a process of child participation and child-adult consultations carried out by the Malta Foundation for the Well-being of Society created Project Comunitarium. Project Comunitarium, let me translate it literally. Project is project in English, comunitaria, it's a coining of two words, community and area. Area is there, but we're referring to environment. Project Comunitario aims to create an open, safe, inclusive, and environmentally friendly space, primarily with children and for children. The project will give children and young people the opportunity to play, exercise, share, and learn through a program of non-formal education, which is being developed by the Malta Trust Foundation as a partner to the project in collaboration with the Faculty of Education of the University of Malta. Another real-life example also from Malta is the quest by children for a better environment. Where later, in fact, children and the Young People's Council within the Foundation for the Wellbeing of Society, and together with and in partnership with the Children's Rights Observatory Malta, presented children's aspirations through a manifesto to aspiring politicians with no less than 20 proposals on the environment. This child participation process, whereby children were invited to convey their aspirations for their well-being, for the well-being of society, involved over 20,000 children in Malta. That is 1 in every 5 children in this country. I will mention just a few of these proposals. Children living on these islands are asking Maltese authorities to put in place new rules for buildings to have more green spaces, such as dedicate a portion of their front or surrounding area as a green space with flowers and plants, as well as roof gardens. Develop initiatives for the beautification of local communities, such as plantation of more trees, flowers, wall gardens, and the use of art and colors. Strengthen and enforce community upkeep to achieve a cleaner environment in every locality and push for a culture, discipline regarding littering. Carry out regular maintenance of playgrounds, gardens, and public spaces. Address the pressing issue of climate change, such as by introducing initiatives to reduce the use of plastic use, have cleaner seas, and increase recycling. Children are now, with the support of the Malta Foundation for the Wellbeing of Society, are advocating with authorities to listen to what they are telling them and to act. At COP26 in Glasgow, thousands of children protested outside the confines of the conference, demanding action to save their world. However, inside the conference, very few children and young people were given the opportunity to make their voices heard. Child participation should never be tokenistic. Let us continue to advocate for global recognition and fulfillment of children's inalienable right to a healthy environment. I encourage you to continue to advocate for the creation of safe spaces and opportunities in our countries for children to have their voices heard on climate change and the safeguarding of our environment. We must be relentless and resolute on this issue, as we know it is the future of our children that the international community is tampering with. Let us enhance all of our efforts in our respective responsibilities to compel governments and authorities to respect, to promote and to consider the rights of children and young people in implementation of the Paris Agreement at all levels. I therefore appeal to governments and authorities across the globe to accelerate investment in child and youth-responsive adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and mitigation measures, realizing full well the urgent need to focus on reaching children most at risk, and advocate for child-sensitive criteria to be mainstreamed in multilateral funds. As I mentioned earlier, and I stress again, the need to enhance the meaningful participation of children and youth in climate change processes, essential to ensure climate and environmental justice for a better tomorrow for all children, and in particular in the best interest of the most vulnerable. I would like to conclude by again congratulating you, Mario, for hosting this international conference here in Malta and for leading a US-funded research involving multi-stakeholders and want to assess the links between access to nature and human well-being. And thank you, Grant, because I'm sure you have been catalyst. Finally, I would like to end my contribution by quoting Mary Robinson, the former President of the Republic of Ireland, an activist for climate and environmental justice. Mary Robinson said, and I quote, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Yet, when it comes to the effects of climate change, there has been nothing but chronic injustice and the corrosion of human rights." With this inspiring quote from my friend and colleague Mary Robinson, I would like to stress that we are dealing with a most fundamental human rights issue, and therefore climate change and environmental degradation has also to be dealt with from a human rights perspective. Least we can do as one human family is to respect and safeguard what our forefathers and foremothers have dutifully approved and agreed upon more than 70 years ago, that is, the United Nations Declaration of Universal Human Rights. Addressing issues related to climate change is an act of justice to one and all. Thank you.